Support for the Idaho Matters podcast is brought to you in part by University of Idaho, Idaho's only Carnegie R1 classified research university. Our Carnegie R1 designation recognizes the discoveries we make that help our forests thrive. It means we're creating more doctors and doing real research to strengthen cybersecurity for Idaho businesses, our energy sector, and every Idahoan. More at go.uidaho.edu/Idaho-is-Idaho. Stay informed with Boise State Public Radio's weekly newsletter. Delivered every Tuesday morning, it brings you the latest local news on politics, the environment, arts, and culture. Plus, get highlights from Idaho Matters and the Mountain West News Bureau. Sign up today at boisestatepublicradio.org.
More Idaho Matters now from the studios of Boise State Public Radio News. I'm Gemma Gaudet. Here in Idaho, the teen suicide rate is more than 3 times the national average. That's according to St. Luke's Health System, which is taking part in a new study to reduce adolescent suicide using prevention programs in schools. It's called the Building Resilience in Teens Through Education, or BRIGHT trial. And Dr. Anna Radin is a co-principal investigator for the study. She's an applied research scientist at St. Luke's Health System, and she's joining us now to talk more. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Gemma. It's great to be here.
So, Anna, you're going to compare 2 different programs. One is called SOS, one called YAM. Can you break down these 2 programs? And can you just start with SOS?
Sure, absolutely. So both of these programs are designed to be delivered in a normal classroom setting in junior high, middle, or high school. So the aim is to be minimally disruptive to the normal school schedule. And the SOS Signs of Suicide program is a structured classroom-based prevention program that teaches students to recognize warning signs of suicide and symptoms of depression, and teaches them to respond using an acronym ACT, which stands for Acknowledge that there's a serious concern. Show the person that's sharing this concern with you that you care about them and respond in a way that's caring, and then tell a trusted adult.
So then what is YAM and how does this program work?
Yeah, so YAM, it stands for Youth Aware of Mental Health, and it is a multi-session, highly interactive program that uses discussion and role play to build emotional awareness, coping skills, and help-seeking behaviors in youth, really emphasizing prevention and peer support before a crisis occurs. So both of these programs have really solid evidence behind them. Both have been shown to reduce suicide attempts in teens by about half. They're the 2 most effective, well-researched studies we're aware of at this point, and both are really good, but this will be the first time they've been directly compared to see which one works best.
So can you next break down how this new study will work? Because my understanding is it's going to last 5 years. So talk to us about the study, but then, how many students are involved? What grades are we talking about?
Sure. Yeah, it is a big study. It will take place over 5 years, and we will follow a total of about 7,000 students over 1 to 2 years to see how their mental health improves or changes over time, depending on whether they've received the SOS program or the YAM program in their school. We'll be partnering with 80 different schools across 4 states, Idaho being one of them. We'll be co-leading this work with Nationwide Children's Hospital in Ohio. That'll be one of the states, as well as UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina and University of Washington. So those are the 4 states. We'll have 20 schools per state partnering with us. Each of the schools will deliver one of the interventions, or in some cases will be randomly assigned to deliver both interventions sequenced over 2 years, so we can see is the combination of the programs even more effective than either of them independently. And we'll, as I said, follow students to see how they do. And we're hoping to learn not just which program works best, but are there differences geographically? Maybe one program seems to work better in Idaho and another's better in North Carolina. Are there differences by grade? So maybe one program is really better positioned for junior high students or middle school students versus high school, and the other works better with older students. We'll be looking at differences in rural versus urban communities. And if the two programs combined is most effective, we want to understand if there's a sequencing that's ideal. Should one be delivered first and then the other second? So those are the kinds of operational questions we'll be looking at in addition to the kind of primary question of which one is most effective.
So you mentioned 20 different Idaho schools will take part. Can you give us a sense of where these schools will be? I mean, which district? Because you did mention, rural versus urban.
Yeah, so we've got a combination of four districts so far selected. We'll be partnering with Boise Schools, Caldwell, Mountain Home, and Twin Falls School Districts. And we're also working to recruit a few additional rural school districts for the study. Our intent is to support these and other school districts with training on whichever program works best at the end of the study so that long after the research grant ends, our best suicide prevention program to their students. But in addition to those districts I just mentioned, really the goal is to bring these programs to Idaho for the first time. Boise Schools does implement signs of SOS today.
Mhm.
But the other school districts, this will be kind of the first time these are introduced, and we're really excited to bring the programming to Idaho to get folks trained up in our state and able to implement these in our schools, including beyond the school districts that will take place in the or take part of the study.
So will any private schools be involved in this at all? And I ask that because I mean this when we look at suicide risk, I mean this is not just something that happens in our public school system.
Yeah, that's a great question, Gemma. So you're completely right that suicide can affect any student, any person, regardless of whether they're homeschooled, going to a small community school, a big public school, a private school. Definitely populations in all of those areas are impacted. So our goal with the research is, first of all, to do the study, but secondly, the results of the research will be, I think, impactful for folks in all of those different settings. So we are focusing primarily on partnering with the public school districts for the study, but we certainly intend to partner with other groups that are interested in other schools once we have some results to share and try to get these rolled out as broadly as possible within the state once we know which one is most effective.
Oh, you're very aware that adolescent suicide risk looks incredibly different across communities. So,
Yeah.
how will the trial itself address differences? And what I mean by that is, things that maybe impact, an adolescent in a rural area versus an adolescent in an urban setting. Grade level, right? I mean, there are
Mhm.
so many factors.
Yeah, there are a lot of factors. One of the reasons this study is so large is because we really want to be, we say statistically powered, meaning we want to have a big enough sample that we can look at small differences between different subgroups of interest. So you just mentioned a couple of those. Grade in school is one we're really interested in. Rural versus urban area is another, but we'll be able to look at, as I mentioned, differences across states as well. And then we'll look at, schools that already have other suicide prevention programming ongoing. We don't want anyone to stop work that's already underway, so we'll be taking that into consideration as well. Some of these schools have Sources of Strength or Hope Squad or other great suicide prevention programming already happening. So we want to see when we layer these additional programs on top, what does that look like?
Mhm. Okay, so let's say there's a school, as you mentioned, that already has a program in place. You will then decide in the study, you know, on top of what they're already doing, they might do the SOS program or they might do the YAM program. Then
Mhm.
from there, you will take all of that, right? And then figure out if I'm understanding you
Yeah.
correctly, what might be the most effective in that particular school or district location, et cetera.
Exactly. So we will be able to include schools that have other programs ongoing. Like I said, we're not asking schools to stop anything that they're up for continuing. And then we'll be able to look across because we have such a big sample. We'll be able to look and pull out, okay, for schools that were also doing sources of strength in addition to SOS, what does that look like? For schools that were doing sources and have added YAM, what does that look like for them? So that's really the benefit of doing a study of this size and of this scale. It's the reason the research grant is so large, and it's the reason it takes us 5 years to do the work because we really want to get a big sample so we can look at all these little things that might make a big difference in terms of which program works best and how do we support our students best.
So, this BRIGHT study, Anna, is building on St. Luke's largest study of its kind in Idaho. Can you talk to us about how this new study will actually springboard off of that old research?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've invested at St. Luke's significant effort and resources in suicide prevention research over the past 8 years or so. And our largest study we've completed so far is called the SPARK trial, which stands for Suicide Prevention Among Recipients of Care. This was a study to compare the effectiveness of two different forms of phone and text message based follow up care delivered by the Idaho Crisis and Suicide Hotline for adolescents and adults who screened at risk for suicide in our emergency departments or clinics at St. Luke's. And we enrolled over 1,520 participants, half of which were adolescents between the ages of 12 and 17, and half were adults between the ages of 18 and all the way up to 93. And
Oh,
then we
wow.
followed folks for about a year, and half of people were randomized to receive what we call instrumental support over the phone, meaning we were checking in with them by phone to see if they needed help updating their safety plan, if they needed help getting to their mental health treatment appointments. We wanted to make sure they were connected with resources if they needed support with transportation or childcare, things like that. So that was one of the interventions. And the one we compared it to is called Caring Contacts, which involves sending out a series of really simple, non demanding messages of care and support over a year. And people got those texts and they could decide if they wanted to reply or not, but they might just say something like, "Hey, Gemma, I'm here if you ever need to share what's going on in your life, and I hope something nice happens for you today."
Okay, and so then you'll take that research then from that study and build on it, correct?
Yeah, well, part of what we learned in that study is that the text message approach, which was really focused on connecting with people more so than giving them concrete support with their suicide care specifically, that connection text message based format worked really, really well in adolescence. We found that in adolescence, the two treatments were equally effective at 6 months, but by 12 months, those caring contacts text messages worked quite a bit better.
Hmm.
And 2.5 times fewer teens reported suicide attempts in the second half of that study if they were receiving those text messages versus the phone calls. So that told us a lot about teens. Number one, the importance of connecting with other youth, the importance of connecting and just feeling supported that way. And so we know that youth are already talking to their peers about what's going on in their lives. They're already, in many cases, sharing their suicide risk with their peers, but their peers may not know how to handle that. And so
Hmm.
that's part of the reason we decided to move upstream and look at these universal school based approaches that really provide teens, as well as their teachers and their families, the tools they need to be able to notice when something's seriously wrong in a peer, and then what to do about that, how they support their friend, but also how they loop in an adult, and making sure adults are well equipped to support the teens in their lives as well. So, one of the things we heard when we shared our results back with our team at St. Luke's, our pediatricians in particular really pushed us to go upstream and think about how can we better support teens before they're screening at risk for suicide at a primary care visit or in the emergency department. And schools really have become the front line in suicide prevention in many cases. And so we just really want to lean into that and do whatever we can to support our schools to have the best information possible about how to do that really well, how to support our teens.
So, with this study being so large, how are you able to fund this trial?
Yeah, great question. This is funded by a grant from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or PCORI. PCORI is a large non-governmental organization that funds large comparative effectiveness research studies to help people make decisions between two good treatment options. So most of their research is done in healthcare settings. In our case, this is in a school, but it's still a public health issue we're working on. And one of the things I love about comparative effectiveness research is that it's really not experimental. We're not developing something new that's never been done, but it has you select kind of the two best versions of something. In this case, we've selected the two most effective suicide prevention programs in schools that have the best evidence for reducing suicidal behavior in teens. And then you directly compare those head to head to see which works best. And are there subgroups in which it works? One may work better in than the other. Maybe those differ for some of the groups we talked about earlier.
What are you ultimately hoping to learn from all of this?
Well, we have a couple different goals. I think one of the things I love about this study, and one of the reasons we're really enthusiastic about it, is because it will have both immediate and enduring public health impact. So, the immediate impact is that all these students in all these schools are getting the best possible suicide prevention programming to help them support their peers and themselves to stay safe, while at the same time, we're advancing the science of school-based suicide prevention programming and learning a lot about how to do this work well. This will have an impact both in Idaho and the other three states that are part of the study, but certainly well beyond that as well. So there's the research piece, there's the immediate public health practice piece, and then the other piece that's really exciting is just bringing these programs to our state for the first time in many cases, and getting our school districts comfortable implementing them. We'll be training up a lot of people in how to deliver these interventions. Both are manualized programs that require certified trainers, and so we'll be getting a whole bunch of folks in Idaho trained, and they'll be able to continue implementing this long after the study ends. So those are really the goals, giving the schools the information they need to pick the best program, but also supporting our schools in real time and into the future to be able to do this work as well as possible.
So you've said that both the SOS and the YAM approach are safe and effective. Are you ultimately hoping that through this study you can, add on, right? Layer in ways to improve on these methods?
Yeah, well, I think this will be the first time, as I said, that they're directly compared. It'll also be the first time that
Mm.
anyone has evaluated sequencing the two programs over a 2-year period. And we hypothesize that that probably will work even better than delivering either program independently because they work a little differently. They're both designed to help youth and adults and arm them with information, but they're designed differently enough that we think there may be an additive effect of layering them together. And so learning how to do that piece well, and all the operational concerns that go along with that, I think will set us up really well to be able to give schools advice, once the study's over. And one of the key things we're focused on in this study is engagement with our communities, with our schools, with our students and parents. That'll be a big part of this research so that they're engaged and advising on how to do the study, which outcomes are most important to look at, how should these programs be delivered in schools, and then what do we do with the results at literally every phase of the research. We'll have all of those groups plugged in, and our hope is that this research and the results will really be co-designed and co-owned by our schools and our communities so that there's buy-in, and so that the information we produce at the end of this is really actionable for them so that they can do something with it.
Okay, that was actually my next question. What do you hope to do with the results of this study? Because you are going to get, hopefully, so much information.
Yes, yeah. So there's kind of the immediate dissemination work in our state to make sure our partner school districts know the results right away. We also want to share the results beyond those immediate school districts, as I mentioned, and see how we can stand up these programs in other schools. And then certainly we'll be working to share the results nationally and, through academic conferences and publications and things like that, but also through networks of schools, networks of children's hospital associations. We'll be looking at different ways to get the information out there.
You mentioned in the very beginning of our conversation that Idaho is one of 4 states that's going to participate in this study. And it's, I believe, 80 schools in total. So you had mentioned
Mhm.
Idaho, Ohio, Washington, and North Carolina. So
That's right.
once you have gathered not just all of the information from this study in Idaho, but then you're able to see the results of the studies in these other 3 states.
Mhm.
What do you think can come of that in regards to could these models work beyond just Idaho? Because yes, we're unique, but we're not the only state that has urban and rural interface.
Yeah, definitely. And we're not the only state really struggling with suicide as a public health problem. So all 4 states are really enthusiastic about taking part in this research, and certainly will learn from having such a geographically and culturally and demographically diverse population. But I think then also, if Idaho has done this, then, surrounding states in the Intermountain West may say, that's a state that looks a lot like mine. Let me see what they've done and see if we can learn from that. And I think the same thing will happen in the other states. And so your reach and the generalizability of your findings is really expanded when you have such a large and broad study population.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming in today. This is such critically important work that you are doing. So thank you for taking time to talk with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time too.
We've been speaking with Dr. Anna Radin. She's an applied research scientist at St. Luke's Health System. She's also a co-principal investigator for a 5-year study that's called Building Resilience in Teens Through Education Study, or BRIGHT. The reason for this is to find ways to reduce adolescent suicide using prevention programs in schools. Now, we will, of course, put more information on our website, boisestatepublicradio.org. Stay with us because we'll have more Idaho Matters right after this. I'm Gemma Gaudette, and this is Idaho Matters.
Looking for another podcast to listen to? Check out The Nature of Idaho from our partner station KISU in Eastern Idaho. Join hosts Peter Pruitt and Dr. Leif Tapanilla as they share fascinating stories from the Gem State's great outdoors, celebrating Idaho's wildlife, landscape, and natural wonders. That's The Nature of Idaho from KISU. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.